Hey, everybody, welcome back to the second edition of our AI Demystified webinars. Had a lot of great feedback last week. One thing I wanted to mention is during the session, if you have questions today, don't be shy. Go ahead and post them to the Q&A. More questions, the better. So welcome back. Excited to have the team at Ride the Next Wave share this week's information with you. Jason?
Yeah, and while we're waiting for a few people to jump on, just to recap last week, we gave everyone kind of that mental model for how AI works. And today is really where the model meets your actual work. So we're going to look at the data you already have, exports, reports, spreadsheets, things that get built every day. And this is where AI is going to give you some of that time back as we show you how to automate some of those processes. Maybe give everybody just another minute here before we get started. But again, yeah, thanks for everybody for coming back out today. Appreciate it. Okay. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, Sandeep, are you going to share the slides or?
I am going to share the slides, yes.
Got it. Okay.
I'll be starting.
We're a minute or two after. I'm sure people keep joining on, but I guess, yeah, let's go ahead and kick things off.
All right. So yeah, as Corey mentioned, welcome back, guys. This is great that we have everyone here. I'm going to start out by sharing my screen really quickly and doing a quick recap of what we learned last time, and proceeding to then continue on the session we have planned today. Okay. Hopefully my screen's visible. So yeah, last time we learned about AI Demystified, where we went through basic literacy and keywords you guys need to learn about, and what is the prompt templates you guys need to follow. Hopefully you guys have understood that part. Today, we're going to go over, as Jason mentioned, today we're going to go over certain topics that will help you on day-to-day use cases, and we're going to focus on departments. Different departments, finance, marketing, and engineering. And we're going to look at what each department goes through in a bit more specific lens and understand how we can modify the data, what is data tax, understand a better prompt template, and then go ahead and finally indulge in co-work. So starting that off, well, last time we learned about most of the skills and templates that we need to follow when learning with data and prompting and how role works, what is context. Today, we're focusing on more working smarter with your data, right? So not new data, not any system data, not a 6-month-old implementation, not the data sitting in your ERP exports or your spreadsheets. We're going to focus on the data that you already have, and we're going to go through step by step on how to implement it smarter. Right. So understanding today's data this is the thought for today, right? This is the main line we're going to focus on. The data that you have today is either trapped in systems or exports somewhere.
Is anybody moving the slides?
Is it not visible?
It's not.
I don't think you're
the first slide actually. So.
I don't think you're in presenter mode yet. You still have the side up.
Oh no, I have been moving my slides. Do you guys see it now? Is it better now?
We see a SharePoint version. That's what we're seeing, but it's kind of static. It's not moving. So maybe reshare it.
Yep, I'll do that.
See, even the IT companies have technology issues. It's everybody.
Do you guys see it now?
No, still not showing.
Okay, so
okay, now it was visible for a second. So.
Yep, you just got to turn your screen back on. I think we had it there.
It just popped in for like microsecond. There you go.
Okay, right.
There we go. Yep.
So
much better.
So now you guys can see the whole thing. All right, perfect, cool. I'll continue. Right, so again, where I left off, we're going to go through your data. We're going to figure out what data you have and how to use it smart. Right, that's really what it is. The data that we have today is mostly trapped in systems, reports, whatever. So the main point of the data that we spend a lot of time on is finding out what is important within the data, cleaning the data, consolidating it, and formatting it according to what we need, right? We spend a lot of time in this data that we go through time and time again. Instead, today what we want to show you is a singular template you can use and another way to connect your system, which is your LLM of your choice. Today we're going to show Claude to these different reporting systems, ERP, CRMs, and making the process faster and then getting the answers you need pretty quick.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, that part there, that's the part that nobody likes to talk about because it feels like it's a chore, right? Finding data, cleaning it up, consolidating, formatting it, and you got to do all that before we see any benefit for all that effort, right? So that sucks. But today's session is really about recognizing it doesn't have to feel that way. So
Yep, absolutely. So, right. So mostly our goal today and what we're going to be doing is on the left, you can see the goal. At the end of the session, you're going to walk away or you're going to take a file that you already export, maybe an expense report, an inventory snapshot, a contract file, upload it to Claude and ask it a question in plain English, no formula, right? On the right is the problem we're trying to solve, right? Most business users, and I bet most people in the room spend maybe 3 to 4 hours in what we call something called data tags, right? That's the time you spend before you get the decision made. And we'll name it properly in a few minutes. But here's what you'll be walking away with. You'll be understanding what is the main prompting template that most people use in the industry right now. Secondly, you will be understanding what is mode 1 versus mode 2. Mode 1 is where you can bring the data to AI. In short, it would be exporting the file that you already have, or the file that you already have, or the data set, uploading it to Claude as we did, and then getting the responses. And the second set, which is mode 2, will be connecting your LLM to a data set of your choice, an ERP, a CRM, a database of your choice, and getting the answer. Right now, we have a few things planned for today. This is basically going to be the roadmap for the next 1 hour. We've already done with the opening, setting up why this matters, and then module 1, we're going to be naming the problem that most people go through but don't talk about. That's the data tax problem, right? Module 2 will be basically connecting your data to the system directly. That's the second step. Module 4, we're going to be covering the governance bridge, making sure what we're doing is responsible. All right. So data tax is basically understanding. So this is the problem that no one talks about, as we mentioned, because not a single person in the business role pays this tax, but nobody puts it on the agenda, right? Everyone pays this tax, but no one puts it on the agenda. No one writes it up as a process improvement opportunity. It's just the way things are, right? You spend hours getting ready with the data or prepping it before you can do anything useful. And everyone does it, but no one questions it, right? And that's the fundamental thing we're going to be looking into today. Quick show of hands really quickly. How many of you spend time cleaning, formatting data, consolidating it? Because I sure do a lot of this. I can't see the screen, so I'm assuming a bunch of you have put up your hands. I'm gonna go past this really quickly.
yeah, we got about 10 hands up.
All right, thank you. So here's the tax mainly broken down, right? And this is what we're going to discuss. Finding, right? Maybe you spend maybe 1 to 2 hours a week, running last month's report again because you can't find the file, maybe waiting on the IT to give you access, hunting through different folders for the Q4 report that someone saved in a weird file name, something, right? Cleaning, another maybe 1 to 2 hours, you're removing duplicate rows, right? You're fixing the data formats because maybe one system uses month, day, year, and another uses, I don't know, day, year, month, right? Reconciling the vendor names because Acme Corp is actually ACME in caps, right? Consolidating, this is one of the bigger things that I've looked at with maybe taking 1 to 3 hours of your time, where VLOOKUP basically between your ERP report and your CRM export, you're copy pasting it into the master spreadsheet that your colleague will again rebuild from scratch because the old one broke, right? And then we have formatting, but this usually takes maybe 1 to 2 hours, making it look right for the leadership, rebuilding the chart because someone basically changed the data source. It could happen in various terms. So add it all up together, maybe 4 to 9 hours a week, every week before a decision gets made, right?
Yeah,
Now,
I was going to say, when you add up those hours, right? I mean, it's multiple hours per person per week, right? And that's before a single decision gets made. And really, that's not inefficiency. It's just the reality of the design of most modern business systems. So I think the big question today is, does it have to stay that way? And it shouldn't, right? We'll show you why it doesn't.
Yep. Right. So we're gonna take an example with a person, right? Let's say we go with David Chen. He's a controller at a 130-person medical device company. Every morning, David pulls maybe 4 separate reports from his ERP. He copies them into Excel. He builds a variance report by the cost center. He formats it for the CFO's 10 minutes. So every Monday morning, that's 3 hours. And you do the math, that comes out to be about 48 hours working in a week. That's maybe 144 hours in total. So nearly 4 full working weeks every year spent on a report nobody has questioned in 3 years, right? The CFO asks CFO would probably not ask how you built this, but rather the CFO would ask, what should I be worried about, right? And David today spends 3 hours on how and 8 minutes on the what. And this is something we want to look today. After today, the same report would eventually take 8 minutes of review and 3 hours go back to David, right? And this is most of the middle work that we want to say. And the refrain we're looking at here, right? None of the middle work like finding, cleaning, consolidating, formatting creates any value, right? Zero. It delivers the data to decision, but no one gets promoted for delivering data, right? They get promoted for making good decisions with the data. So today, with an LLM of your choice, which is Claude, we would eliminate the delivery. You keep the decision, right? Hours are being spent formatting, not on a sign of diligence, but I know this might sting a little, but many of us take pride in the meticulous spreadsheets that we have. So we're going to be rebuilding last week's report is not the job. The job would be what you do once you have the report.
Yeah, and I think, to kind of look at, the data text, I'm sure this explanation makes sense, but, to look at a day-to-day life example, like I love to cook. I love to do it for, cook the family. It's a passion, right? But imagine how much easier it would be to cook a big family dinner if all the prep work was done for you, right? You didn't have to go to the grocery store, drive there, make a list, cut the veggies, wash everything down. You just got to start cooking right away. And we can use AI in much the same way, right? You have it go out and do all the prep work, and then we can focus on the meal, right? Enjoy the end result rather than all that effort that goes into just getting to there.
Yep, that's accurate. So we're going to start with 2 modes. As we mentioned at the start of the session, we're going to have 2 modes here. One is going to be mode 1, where we bring the data to the LLM of our choice, and mode 2, when we connect the LLM to the data set that we're going to use, right? Starting off, right. So remember in session 1, we talked about a role, context, data set, question, output, but this is a bit more specific to what we're going to look at, right? This is the formula. You're seeing 4 elements here. We're going to be using this every time. We're going to go ahead now. So element 1 would be role, right? Who you are, and telling Claude who you are and what your business context is. Not just saying like, I'm an analyst, but being rather specific. For example, I'm a controller at a 130 medical device company. Why does this matter, right? Because the same data gets interpreted differently depending on who's looking at it, right? A supply chain manager and a CFO would ask different questions about the same inventory data. So the role guards every answer that Claude's get to you in your respective department.
Yeah, and
The
I think this
second-
role,
Yeah,
I think
sorry,
that first role, that first one is the one that, as people are getting started, it's probably the one that gets skipped the most, but it can have the biggest impact. To your point, it grounds Claude to who you are and what the business context is, which changes the quality of every answer that follows that. So without it, you're just getting a generic response. But with it, you're going to get an answer that fits your world, right? So that role, make sure you highlight that it's ingrain that in your memory. Do that on every prompt. It's going to greatly improve what you're getting out of it.
Yep, that's pretty accurate. And the second element we're looking at now is basically going to be data set, right? We describe what we're uploading. Don't just like drag and drop a file and say, analyze this, tell Claude what it's supposed to be looking at. Maybe you can say, I have uploaded the Q1 expense report by the cost center from our ERP. What does it contain? What's the time period? What system did it come from? And the more context you give, the better the analysis becomes, right? The third element we're looking at is questioning. This is where most people get it wrong. They're either too vague by saying, tell me what's interesting, right? Which is a bad prompt. We should rather use a strong verb. For example, identify, analyze, compare, flag, summarize, right? So be specific about what you want to know. Maybe identify the top 5 variances and anything I should flag, right? That's a question Claude can answer precisely. Now, the last element we're looking at is the output format. We have to tell Claude how you want the answer to be structured, right? Do you want it to be a table? Do you want it to be a paragraph? Do you want it to be an email draft, etc., right? If you don't specify, Claude will guess, and it will usually guess wrong, right? Give me a summary table of 2 bullet points for Monday's review. That's when Claude knows exactly what it has to give or it has to reproduce. So every time you're prompting to Claude, please make sure you're following the role, data set, question, output every time. This is what it looks like in practice. And we're going to look at that in the coming slides. Okay. Right. So like we mentioned, we're going to be going by department, but by department, and we're going to start off with finance. Right? The way we start off with this is we're going to go back to David Chen. Right. Here's the scenario. It's maybe the 5th of the month. Right. David has a Q1 expense report exported from the ERP, setting this downloads folder, maybe 14 cost centers, 6 expense categories, and 84 rows of data. Standard stuff. The main prompt we're going to be walking to will have all 4 of this. Right. We're gonna start out by defining the role, right? As you can see, the role would be as a controller at a 130-person medical device company. That just becomes element number 1. Element number 2 would be the data set. I have uploaded our Q1 expense report by cost center. That's element number 2, right? And then question. As you can see, there is a multi-part question, which is fine. Like for example, identify the top 5 budget variants ranked by dollar amount. We can suggest a likely business reason for each behind based on a data pattern, and then flag any variants. I should escalate to the CFO before our Monday 10 a.m. review, with maybe 1 sentence of talking point for each flagged item. This becomes element 3 with maybe strong words, as you can see as identify, suggest, flag, right? Now, the output at the very bottom is saying format this as a table followed by escalation flags. That becomes your element number 4. That's the whole prompt that you're going to get, right? Now, here's what Claude comes back with ideally, right? You can see at the bottom there has, it just doesn't come up with like plain English explanation, not just marketing is up by 40%, but ideally it will tell you based on data why marketing is up. So marketing is plus 40%. Tied to the February trade show, and then the escalation flag would come up now, right? And then we have to make sure we follow the VEP model we discussed last time. The VEP model essentially emphasizes that please double check your data, right? Check whether the HR number is against the source, right? Is it actually 64%, right? Do we have to make sure we verify all of that, right? Don't just trust the math blindly. And then you can edit and say, hey, rewrite the talking point in a way maybe David talks to the CFO. Now, Claude does not know that relationship, so that's why you have to define it. And then you personalize it. Say, oh, David knows the planned VP of HR hire in January. Claude doesn't. So David adds that context here. And we'll see a demo of this. Right? So we export the exact prompt I talked about. Then we upload the file, which is going to be a CSV file that has all the Q1 expense report. Right, paste that into Claude. It reads and understands the expense report, goes through the file step by step. It actually uses a scale file for creating a well-formatted output, and then gives you a polished document. Skip a little ahead. And should be around here. Perfect. So it tells you here's a variance briefing. Here are 3 tabs you need to cover on Monday. And here are the top 5 variances, right? All 5 salaries. Let's see it. And then it gives you the escalation flags that it needs to look into, like R&D, marketing support, customer support salaries are flagged. It's a common thread. All exceed 9% over budget. It'll call it out to you. And this is a JSX file. You can use an HTML file. You can have a Excel format, anything, right? As long as you define it. Okay, so that's the response we're getting from Claude on finance. Now, another scenario we're going to do this is basically looking through a different department, but applying the same formula, right? Linda Park, supply chain manager at a 160-person class 2 medical device company. She has an inventory export with the current stock levels and a 30-day demand forecast for 160 SKU, right? And her plan, or her Thursday plan, which is tomorrow, and her VP always asks the same question: what are we at the risk of running out? What are we doing? Now, notice that this is a 2-part prompt here. And the first thing, the part 1 is the analysis, which is to identify any SKU where current stock wouldn't cover for the next 30 days of demand. and then rank the days by supply, lowest first, of course, and then flag anything below 7 days as critical. That becomes your table format that you need to follow over here, right? The part two is action, right? So the draft supplier follow-up emails for the two most critical SKUs, and we're going to follow a professional tone, explain the urgency, ask for faster deliveries, right? Request response by the end of the business day. So what's powerful here is that Claude doesn't just analyze, right? It produces action items. Linda doesn't just get a risk table. She would eventually be getting 2 emails that she can review once and send it out, right? Analysis plus action in a single conversation. So the output we're going to look at here is that we're looking at a color-coded risk table, right? Critical, high, watch. Okay, right? And then the top 2 critical SKUs with the exact days of supply plus 2 complete supplier-specific generated in about 15 seconds. Again, make sure you follow the VEP model where we verify the days of supply, check the days of supply math, right? Is the current stock divided by the daily demand actually 4.8 days, right? Whatever, could be. If not, edit the email tone, right? Maybe if Linda has a long-standing relationship with one supplier, the email should sound different from a cold follow-up with a new vendor, right? And then personalize it, add contract terms, look at past history delivery, right? And then add any context only Linda knows, right? 45 minutes of cross-referencing and email drafting becomes about 4 minutes of work. That's what we're trying to do here, right? And let's look at the demo real quick. Again, we show the prompt format. It's the same thing, role, giving the context, what do you want, uploading the data set, and giving the output format that you need. Right there is the CSV file or the Excel file. Upload that into Claude. It does its thing. And then he said, give it to me as a table. It will give you the answer of inventory shortfall report, a 30-day demand coverage, saying, okay, well, these are the 2 things that you need to look out for. And it'll give you an analysis of saying which one is critical, which one is not. 57 out of the 160 SKUs have current stock below the 30-day forecast demand, 2 are critical, right? Below 7 days of supply that you need to look into, etc. and so forth. Then you can say, okay, well, now that we have the exact SKUs that we need to be careful for or be cautious about, we can now draft a follow-up for the 2 most critical SKUs. Here's a tone you need to follow, explain the urgency, ask for a faster delivery method, and request response by EOD. Right, and there you go. So it thinks about it, and of course you have to VEP this whole thing because dear this and so on and so forth. There are plenty of things you need to audit before you send out by following the VEP model, and that's exactly what we're doing here. Right. And then the second email would be a follow-up in case this email does not actually go through or another company that we have less supply on. All right, the third demo is engineering, right? And this one is particularly powerful because it includes like cross-referencing 2 separate files that usually takes a lot of effort, right? A manual effort. So Marcus Webb, right, engineering manager at a 160-person class 2 device manufacturer, he has 2 exports, an ECO change order with 12 engineering changes and a V&V test tracker with 14 test events and 3 still pending, right? So this is the kind of question that normally takes Marcus to about 90 minutes to answer. He has to open both files, cross-reference the ECO numbers against the test IDs, figure out which items appear in both lists, right? Assess the risks, and then write a coherent summary email, all before the Monday standard. So the prompt we're using here is following the similar format as always. We're defining the role, which is engineering manager, class 2, company, 8-week timeline. We're uploading the data set, which is the ECO log and the VB, both uploaded, right? Question would be identify the open ECOs and failed or pending tests that risk the timeline, cross-reference both files, flag any linked items, rank by risk. And the output is a table plus VP status email covering the top 3 blockers, right? So what Claude would eventually return is a rank blocker table with with critical and high tiers, right? Again, make sure you use the VEP model where you go through each of them. You verify the day open counts, the test status against both the source files. If Marcus knows the VP very well, the bullet points could be more concise on whether to lead with the good news or bad news, right? You can personalize it with internal context. Maybe one of these blockers has a workaround that's already in progress that Marcus already knows about, so you can negate that, right? So on and so forth. So you're saving a lot of time. 90 minutes becomes about 8, and that's just how we're going to go forward.
And I think this is, for those of you on the call in a regulated environment, this 510 case scenario is a great example to consider. Tracking open ECOs and VV tests across separate systems manually isn't just time consuming, but it can be a source of submission risk. So this is a case where the time saved and the accuracy gained matter equally.
Yep. Exactly.
So
And
Like
Sandeep,
there is a question actually from someone.
yeah,
actually.
Andrew just asked a question. What if let me read it so I get it exactly right. What if the AI model makes a mistake?
great question. So the short answer is we should never treat the output as a final thing, right? There are multiple ways the AI model may make a mistake, right? That's called hallucination that we looked at in session 1. You need to always follow the VEP model. That's just what I would say, because that helps you in making sure that the answer is correct. If it's wrong, there are many times it would hallucinate, right? It helps with speed, right? But the human still owns the judgment and the final decision. That's what I'd say. Hopefully that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, I'd say let's keep going. Oh, makes
Right.
sense. So a review
Sounds
should be
good.
added to the time savings estimate. Yep, that's a fair point. So to factor in that review time, right? As far as the time savings, because you still got the review to factor back in you don't have previously.
Yep. Now we can go through a demo, basically the same thing. You upload the context. Now we should be showing you 2 different files, right? One is an ECO change order log, and the other is a VB test track. You say you define the role, you explain the context, and then you have uploaded the data sets that you need. After that, you can cross-reference the files. You explicitly mention that, and then you rank them and you format them as a table. Cool. So this is what it tells you. Here are the 510 submissions, right? Here's the risk blockers. Here's what you need to look at. Here are 2 critical ones that we cross-referenced and found. And then we can say, okay, now draft a VP level status, define the tone, explain the context, take the previous 3 blockers that you mentioned, and then explain the response. So it does that. Right. So that covers practically mode 1 of what we have today. Now, mode 2 will be a brief of how to connect or how do you connect your LLM, or how do you connect Claude to your database of your choice, an ERP CRM database, and then get the answers directly by prompting within Claude, which saves us the time of exporting files back and forth. I would like to give it over to Salesh, where he'll explain mode 2.
Perfect. Sandeep, I'm going to share my screen. Everyone, let me know if you are able to see my screen. Can you see it?
Yeah, we're good.
Perfect, perfect. So, hi everyone. Sandeep, thank you for sharing kind of the mode 1 and how you all can bring AI to your data, right? And we kind of went through the mode 1, which is really primarily for ad hoc analysis, work on any data set. It is amazingly intelligent, and you can save a lot of time, right? The data tax Sandeep talked about. What we're going to do over the period of next 20 minutes is we're really going to talk about mode 2, where the AI model, in this case, we're using Claude as the LLM. It's actually going to connect to your data, so you don't even have to prompt it. You just basically connect the data, give it to Claude, and now you can start talking to it. Okay, so we're going to actually show you kind of how to do this. It is extremely powerful. Um, this capability called Claude Cowork. I don't know if you all have had a chance to look at it, but when this was introduced by Claude, probably I would say maybe 90 days to 120 days back, the stock of companies who are in business process outsourcing, their stock went down because Claude, now the Cowork made it very easy to work with your data. Okay, so imagine Claude as almost like someone, like a colleague who has read every document, every policy you have, every data export you have, and now you are just basically talking to it. It is just the next version of what Sandeep kind of shared in the mode 1. So in Claude Cowork, it runs inside in your Microsoft environment. It will connect to your data. You could have department specific data, which you can train it. HR teams can use their HR policies to train with. And then the question you have replaces the report. What it means is, instead of we thinking about, I need to run a report, or I need to connect the data, I need to have this prompt, you start thinking about what is the business question I want to ask. And the question is always faster, and everyone on the team can ask, not just the analyst, right? So this is an amazingly powerful capability we're going to walk you through. So here is kind of what typical questions you can ask for Claude Cowork, right? And again, these are just sample, but based on the data you have, you are a lot more familiar with that data because you deal with it on a day-to-day basis, whether you are in legal department, you are in sourcing, you are in finance. But literally, you got to think about it not through the lens of the data, but the lens of the business, right? So for finance, it could be, what is my cash position? Can you compare Q1 actuals to budget? Or for supply chain organizations, what is the inventory position on our top 20 SKUs? And we're going to show an example of that. So you got to just basically start thinking about the business questions and not worry about basically the data and how to connect with it. Okay. So
yeah, I was gonna just add there, I think the mind shift really is, the question column, right? For example, which open POs risk causing a stock out in 45 days? That's a question that used to require someone who knew the system, knew how to run a report, had the time to do it. But when you incorporate Cowork, now anyone on the team can ask it. So the analysis doesn't have to be the bottleneck anymore, right? You're enabling everyone across the organization.
Just a quick question for how many of you have either heard of Cowork or have used it in some shape or form? Corey, I
Like
can't see
about 8, 9, 10 people right around there.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So let's just walk through it. So here is kind of how Claude connects to your data. Okay, so it is done really in two parts because there is some engineering involved. There is this one-time configuration which has to be there, and once that's done, then the business schemes can actually take over, right? And if you are familiar with this terminology called MCP, nothing but basically it's a way to connect to your data. It's a capability Anthropic came up with. That's the most important part of this. Forget about all the technical mumbo jumbo in the middle, but just pay attention to number one is install to connect using your existing database and data warehouse. So make sure that you know where data is, you know how to get to that data. That's number one. Number two is somebody in your IT department will help us figure out a way to give you the credentials for it, how to connect to it, almost like what we call it configuring an MCP type of a connector, which is a terminology I said Claude brought in, or Anthropic, and then help you configure basically on your Claude account. Okay, so there are some important kind of what I call it pipelines or connections have to be built one time. Once that's built, it's amazingly um, um, capable of then transitioning into how um, how you can then work with it, right? So once that's done, if you are someone in the business function, then you can then open Claude, go to Cowork. It's a separate tab. We'll show you that in a second. Ask your question, assuming that you have connections to data, whether it's data in your ERP system, it's a combination of, let's say, your ERP and CRM, or you have your finance data in some place, in some kind of expertise somewhere, doesn't matter, or even it's in a third party actually hosted platform, as long as they give you access to connect with it. So you literally ask in plain English, and Claude decides um, how to basically translate that, which data to go and connect with, and give you the insight. And we're going to actually walk you through it in a second here. Okay. So incredibly powerful capability, but the most important piece is the plumbing layer, which either you can set it up or someone from your IT organization or even Tech River can help you actually set this up as well. So let's look at the before and after. So what does Cowork really brings to the table, right? So just like how Sandeep shared, the mode one definitely saves you a lot of time and energy, right? Where before version, you open ERP, you go to your reports, you run the report, you get it into Excel, you calculate the variance, and then you create this PowerPoint slide, or based on what you see in it, you might actually send an email to your chief product officer and say why some of these products basically their costs are we're overrunning those, right? Or work with your CFO and your chief product officer. So that's kind of the before version. After version, go to Cowork, just type the question, summarize my Q1 variances by cost center, flag anything over 10%. And it will basically translate those into queries. And then ask which one of these I should actually escalate to CFO. And boom, you have your answers, right? 45 minutes in your pocket, right? You can do something else with it, connect with your customer, talk to the frontline teams. So this is the kind of capability Claude Cowork is bringing to the table. So let's just look at two demos. Okay, so again, we basically created this this data set for finance and engineering and inventory. So here is kind of a demo of it. So you can see on the left hand side, typically most of us most of the people would be, or they're used to using chat, right, in Claude. But now you go into this another tab, it's called Cowork, and it brings you basically to this screen where, assuming that you have connected all of your data sets and the IT, or you yourself have done all the connections. So now it knows. And there is intricate configuration, which is one time, which we can share with you all how to do it. And Claude has done a really nice job, or Anthropic, to actually document it really, really well. Okay. So in this scenario, we have a PostgreSQL database, um, um, which is running on my machine. That's kind of the scenario, but it could be running anywhere in the cloud. And what we're asking is analyze the Q1 expense performance. Which cost centers are the most over budget? Rank them by variance percentage and flag anything over 15%. Just like Sandeep said, right? Like the prompt has to be well crafted. Okay, where is the data? What are you trying to do? And basically which cost centers, which is you're asking your specific questions, and you are also saying flag something which is beyond a certain threshold. So let's just walk through it. Okay, so here we go. So we talked through most of it. Here we go. Now it's actually starting to connect to your data. It's querying your data, and you can see I've read everything. Let me build a clear visual analysis of it, and you can see it is starting to build it. And as it's looking at the data, it is now basically bringing the human performance in terms of what the total budget, what the actual is, what's the gross overspend. It is, we ask it to basically organize by cost center. We also ask it to flag anything which is 15% over. So you can now see the power of this capability in terms of what is possible with something like this, right? So now it will tell you, here is a complete performance by cost center ranking, key takeaways, so you can see what it's showing you. And it's also showing you the three cost centers that I'm going to take a pause here, right? You can see it, the three cost centers that warrant basically the immediate attention. So as you can see, it is giving you a complete picture based on what it is reading into the data. This is extremely powerful, everyone. And this is fundamentally going to actually take the chats we use today to write emails and reports. Now we are talking about running the business, understanding the business. That's what this is capable of. Okay, so now that it's able to do it, let's just look at, I'm basically saying, show me the details or list of the flag lines, right? That are more than 15%. Okay, so here we go. That's my second question. And it's running it. Here we go. It's starting to basically get me the data slowly. And you can see the flag lines are 18. Here is my spend. And you can see everything which is done. It is giving me actually a summary of it. I'm going to take a pause real quick here. And you can see the lines it flagged, how many of them are critical tier, 7 of them, how many of them are high tier, and how many of them are moderate tier, right? So here is the power, everyone, what it's capable of. Let's just ask another question. Then we're going to say, you know what? Write an email to the chief product officer about the R&D overspend to escalate the situation, okay? Because somebody in finance realized that this is not good. So see what Claude is capable of doing? It's basically saying, what do you want this email? What's the outcome you're looking for from this email, right? You want to schedule a review meeting with the chief product officer because of the spend in R&D. Okay, do you have the CPO's name, or are you going to use your own title? It's going to ask, what should be the tone? Remember what Sandeep talked about, even in the first session, we actually were asking in the prompt, but this capability is so evolved, it's even asking you what should be the tone on the email, what outcome you're looking for, right? And then it's asking you what's the name of the CPO, and here we go, right? It is now it is written an email here real quick here. You can see on the right hand side. I'm going to pause it, and you can see now it wrote the complete email with all the details. It brought the data into your email. Now you are ready to basically send this email and escalate the situation and have that conversation with the chief product officer. Incredibly powerful.
Shailesh, before you jump to the next question, just before we get too far along, since we're doing okay for time, there were a couple other questions I'll read out here to you. This one was, a couple slides back, but it says, how do you write the software validation to use Claude as a regulated software tool?
So repeat the question one more time.
Yep, and if we need Sarah to just add some more color, but how do you write the software validation to use Claude as a regulated software tool? So I apologize, that was a couple slides back. So if it's we might have to refresh the phrasing on there. Or
So was this I'm just thinking, is this a question about the Claude, or is it basically the usage of the Claude? So it seems like it is the usage of the Claude, right?
Yeah, I think it's the usage of the Claude and the output. So how do you validate, a co-work agent that you set up to prove to regulators that its output is accurate and can be trusted? And if that's not framing it the correct way, Sarah, feel free to clarify in the chat.
Maybe I can answer a little bit to that.
Please.
The main, so that's a good point. It's really the usage and the workflow around it. It's not the model itself. So you define maybe the intended use, you document the risk, and you set like boundaries on what the agent can do and cannot do. And eventually you have a human review and then validate the workflow with the test cases, because this is software validation, right? And with the test cases, expected outputs and exception handling. And then you can show the output is reviewed before it actually affects any regulated decision.
Maybe to add to what Sandeep said, maybe just extend it, right? Still, no matter what, still you need to follow the VEP model, number one. And fundamentally, this work would have been done anyway by a human, right? So ultimately, personally, I don't know if I see a difference between whether it's human doing it or a machine doing it to prove it to the regulators. Ultimately, you got to validate the data.
Right. So in short, it would be validate the use case and controls, treat it as a decision support, and then keep human review traceability and maybe standard operating practices in the loop.
And then we had one additional one that said, the validation question depends on your requirements for the tool. What would you use for that?
And in this case, the tool would be CoWork.
I would assume so, yeah. Again, that was about a slide or two prior.
Wait, sorry. So I mean, wait, can you repeat the question? I can't find the questions. Oh, I see it. Okay. So as a
It's in the chat.
historical software guide, the validation question depends on your requirements for the tool. What would you use it for? Okay, so I would frame it around the intended use, right? If CoWork is being used for summarization, drafting, surfacing risk, whatever, you validate it as a decision support tool. But if it was like making decisions or approving regulated decisions, that's a very different and requires a much higher validation bar. Does that answer it? So the real starting point is just being very explicit about the scope and what it can do and what it cannot do. And where a human review is required before anything is used in a regulated process.
And ultimately, your source of truth is where the validation could be, right? Whether the data is coming from your ERP or a CRM. And I think as part of the VEP model, maybe going back to those systems and just making sure that what Claude is telling you is what the reality is.
Yeah, and so Sarah, am I correct in assuming this is in regards to 21 CFR Part 820? Got it. And so I'll tell you, and I cheated. Obviously, I asked Claude, but so there's it depends. So the validation plan, the intended use statement, it depends on what it's doing, and so what specifically is Claude doing in the QA process? And so here's some examples. Drafting CAPA narratives that QA reviews and approves. This is low risk, it requires light validation. But there's a spectrum. If it's acting on records, creating, modifying, closing them in an EQMS, this is the highest risk type of actions. And so would need much a higher level of scrutiny and validation. And so I think it depends on what the use case is, and then we need to go through and determine how big of a risk it is and what level of validation it needs. And so I can share some of this output with both of you, Sarah and Sarah. All right, go ahead, guys.
Should we?
Oh, I want to address address John's question quick. So, John, I agree with you. I think that depending on the type of data that you are putting into these models, you do need to be cautious. We're going to get to it in the next session, but we have some ways to anonymize data before it hits the LLM. But that being said, it's really important that you are on a paid enterprise grade version of these tools so that your data is private and not used to train the model. That being said, nothing is 100%. There's already instances where data has been leaked or spilled over. And so it's a valid concern that you have, John, and one that we spend a lot of time thinking about. I don't have a foolproof solution for you at this point, but yes, it's something you should be mindful of.
Can I maybe go back to kind of what the question around leveraging something like Claude Cowork in a regulated environment? I think for the regulated environment, it's all about tracking basically who is doing what, correct? That's kind of the number one thing, right? In terms of documentation of who is using what data you're using. So I think audit trail with Claude Cowork, and we'll confirm this, okay? I don't think so you will have the same level of what we call it audit trail, just like you would have if someone is actually logging in or someone is trying to basically work with a certain data. So audit logging, we believe, is a challenge with something like Cowork. And that might be the bottle, that might be the, what I call it, the limitation. Is this audit logging? Anyway, I just wanted to share that actually. Okay, so and we can come back and actually share more about it after we look at it internally. But I think auditing is the biggest challenge we see. Perfect. So that is that was our. I'm going to actually go to the next slide here. Let's look at the next demo. A little different, but still with the data which is sitting in that database I just talked about, or it could be in your database. And now we are going to look at it through a supply chain cost risk analysis perspective, right? So we all know, when you manage inventories, reorder points are really, really important, right? To continue your manufacturing. So we have the data set we used. It has inventory data into it. And now here is the question, right? Just like the finance question. Which inventory items are below reorder point? Cross-reference with our Q1 manufacturing cost overruns, and tell me if the supply gaps would make our cost situation worse. So let's see how Claude Cowork is actually able to deal with this data. So you can see it is already starting to connect, but before it connects, it's basically asking where the data is, which we told it where it is. Now it has data, it is trying to look at the data, it is synthesizing it, and now you can see it is starting to basically build this entire reorder point challenge, and able to find out what's going on with it. You can see there are 3 items which are specific to this one product, where all 3 are below reorder point, and if they are not ordered, it's going to cause a genuine problem from a production perspective. So then the next question you can ask is, okay, so provide me basically details of those items, right, which are below the reorder point. So let's see what it's able to bring it. So here we go, right? So it's actually saying, here are the 3 parts. 3 of them are below. Here is their current inventory value. I'm going to take a pause here, and you can see it's starting to basically confirm that what the analysis has flagged. How many quantities do we have for those items? The next specific 400 specific items are simultaneously below reorder point with no buffer across them. So it understands that, and it also understands what it's going to basically cause issues, right? So let's just continue that. So here is the next question we're going to ask, right? It is actually asking, which is, want me to pull the full inventory list to see across? And I said yes. And now it's actually going to pull the inventory scenario about those products which are out there. So here we go. Here we go. It is kind of what it's doing. It's basically saying, let's just go back for a second, right? So you can see these are the basically dependencies which are likelihood at risk. These modules, right? What's the buffer out there? Which one of these are in stock? Which one of these are below reorder point? And then here we go. Now it's given to give you a summary of here is what it discovered. So let me go back here for a second. The scan discovered 2 items that should be on your radar quickly, which is the display model. So you can see it is intelligent enough by looking at the data to give you all this information. So let's just ask another question, which is, okay, now that we know the data, put together a concise briefing document that I could take into a conversation with the chief product officer. Okay, so see what it's trying to do. So now it's actually putting a complete summary. It's writing it, and now you could see it has put this document together on the right hand side, right? So here is the NX400 production line, a supply chain briefing with basically the chief supply chain officer as well as with the chief legal officer in a room. And you could see based off of the data, it is literally able to generate a complete summary for you based on the data and the challenge it identified. So imagine how much time it's going to save if you have this type of a capability. So it is just wanted to show you just 2 different versions of it. One where you looked at the data, generated an email for a conversation. The third one is really finding out what the anomalies are in the inventory space and literally having a conversation with potentially whoever you need to have to understand what's going on with these procurement priorities. So hopefully that gave you a perspective of what Clover is capable of. Extremely powerful tool. But when we think of something like Cowork, we think about this compounding effect, right? Which is per person per week, how much time are you going to save if you do this really well? Obviously, you got to work with your IT partners, and if the IT partners are on this call, they got to work with their business teams to literally improve their lives as well as the organization's posture, right, in terms of driving revenue at the same time, making sure that you are able to actually continue to improve the bottom line. So we just wanted to show you kind of, this is again, these are all conservative numbers. This is a model we are putting in front of you. But if you use a capability like Cowork, here is what's possible, right? Per person per week, the amount of time it goes into continue to kind of routine data work. And what if you use something like this, what would that mean for the organization from a time savings perspective? So if you're building a business case for something like Clover, we just wanted to give you a framework, how you could actually make a business case around it.
Well, and I think, there's so much buzz out there, is AI going to replace or take my job, right? It's an example, right? And it's showing 2,300 hours a year saved, right? But at the end of the day, that's recovered capacity. So instead of doing the busy work, those hours can be applied by your staff to strategy, decisions, client work, things that actually move the business. So, it's really not about replacing people, but enabling them to focus more on impactful areas of your business.
Well said, Jason. That's exactly what we keep sharing with everyone, which is the time you spend can go to strategic work, to building relationship work. So, we talked about a lot of data pieces to it, right? Sandeep talked about it, how to utilize in just traditional Claude chat. I talked about it in Claude Cowork. But ultimately, what we are seeing is that when you start using this data, and there was already a question about the accuracy of this, and even the usage of something like Claude Cowork when it comes to compliance work, right? So with these type of automation, there is an escalating risk ladder you got to think about, right? In terms of what data are you touching, right? If you have your own Excel files and you have exported data, obviously, there's a level of risk, right? And the governance you need is use governed tools, right? And which are basically filtering this PII, PHI data into it. When you're working with your ERP data, make sure that there is role-based access control to get access to this data, right? I think that's going to be the audit trail, which we have all used typically when we have used systems and tools. That does not fundamentally change, even with something like Claude or any other capability you're going to work with to really improve your efficiency and your team's efficiency. HR data, right? We all know strict access control. You got to talk about the HIPAA sensitivity, legal contracts, clinical regulatory data. Some of you are in this space already, and we're gonna address a lot of these in our next webinar, where we're actually going to show you that today's tools are amazingly powerful, but none of them really address some of this. And there are some really amazing tools out there. One of them is a platform called Thimium. We're actually going to showcase the capabilities of this platform, via which you can still use these capabilities of Gemini or Claude or Copilot, but at the same time, it will basically guarantee the compliance of all of these regulations. We're going to bring that to the table in our next webinar. So we're really, really excited about it, right? But when you think about the governance questions, I think we all have been through this. Okay, so I'm preaching to the choir, where who can see what data, always ask that question. Is there an audit tail? Always basically make sure that you do that. And what happens if something goes wrong? How do you deal with it? Okay, so we're going to talk about this in detail in our next webinar.
I think just on those three questions too, just to highlight, right? I mean, keep in mind that these questions aren't necessarily IT questions. They're business questions that IT needs to help answer. But who can see this data? That's an HR and legal question as much as it is a technical one. What happens if something goes wrong? That's a risk question. So the right conversation about AI governance involves more than just the IT department. It has to start before integration even happens.
Yeah. So, hey guys, before we get to the questions, I want to address a couple of things that popped up in the chat. James asked a question about a recent legal case and whether or not information or data shared with AI companies, paid or unpaid, is considered confidential and therefore discoverable in a lawsuit. And so, James, chat or AI usage, AI conversations are treated like any other digital electronic communication or electronic record. Attorney-client privilege, all of those things still apply, but they can also still be discoverable in a lawsuit. So just because something is confidential doesn't make it non-discoverable, and vice versa. I did some looking up, and there was a case, New York Times versus OpenAI, and they required OpenAI to preserve all of its outputs. That has since been unwound, and they're back to their 30-day retention practice. And so I'm not sure if that answers the question you posed, but
can I add to it, Corey?
Yes, go ahead.
So this is exactly what we're going to talk about in the next webinar, where a lot of this sensitivity data, as Corey said, right? It went into OpenAI through ChatGPT, but we're going to talk about how to even prevent it from going into something like ChatGPT, and it will really prevent all of your private data even going to these AI companies. You will maintain a complete control, just like how you maintain it today. So we'll talk about that in our next webinar.
Yeah, and so my position with the use of AI, like if you have an enterprise Claude or OpenAI or Gemini plan, I would never upload any IP into one of those models without layering something on top of it. Even then, I don't know that I would be putting IP into it, because I think 6 months from now, if OpenAI says, "Oh, whoops, we were actually using all your data to train our model," sorry about that. I don't think anybody would really be surprised. And so when you get into uploading, protected health information, clinical trial data, that data, in my opinion, should be anonymized. You should not be just putting straight PHI directly into the models. But like Jason alluded to, these risk and data governance conversations are something that need to happen to determine what the company is comfortable, what their risk profile is. And so a lot of conversations need to be had in organizations determining acceptable use of these platforms.
Spot on. And some companies, keeping the IP point you brought up, some companies are actually they actually install, because these models, you can actually install them in-house. You just need enough, basically, infrastructure to support it. So they basically kept it in their four walls. And now they're able to get best of both worlds. Where it still stays within your four wall. It's running in your own infrastructure. And now you can actually bring a powerful capability like AI for your product development teams. Right?
No, I was having a conversation with one of our most esteemed customers and one of the brightest people I know, Mr. John Savage, a couple weeks ago. I think he's on the call. I hope he is anyway. About, we've had this major push to the cloud, get everything out of the four walls and go to the cloud. And with all the advancements in AI, with all of the potential cybersecurity threats because of these advancements, I half joked, like, I think it won't be long before everybody's bringing stuff back on-prem to really secure their data in their four walls, so they know that it's not leaking out into the real world. And it maybe that's what the future looks like. I guess to be determined, right?
So I know we're out of time. I think we are at 1:07. We were planning to go through a knowledge check, but I think we probably can hold that off.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Next week's session will be all about data governance and securing your data. So have a great week and look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your great questions. Thank you.
Thank you.